first item I want to highlight for folks is some pretty crazy footage from China, of the Chinese media's coverage of the World Cup that's happening right now. So in China, they only have state media, they only have government media, and they are also, as we've talked about elsewhere, Hannah's covered for Based, they're still doing these insane zero COVID crackdown lockdowns, lock people in their homes, all sorts of crazy COVID zero stuff happening over there. So in the World Cup coverage, they're actually blurring out the audience because they don't want Chinese citizens to be aware or realize that the rest of the world is no longer forcibly masking. So that the World Cup fans, most of them aren't wearing masks. So on these videos from China, which will roll in the video version of the podcast, but if you're listening, just imagine it's showing the goals and the gameplay and the highlights, yet the audience and the whole background is all blurred. They're literally censoring reality to keep their people in intellectual chains and deprive them of knowledge of the outside world. It's in order to make sure that they accept their totalitarianism. But I think it's crazy. But B, I also don't think it's working, Hannah.
I mean, I was going to say, I wish I could talk to somebody who formerly lived in China and just ask, like, what that's like being there. Because surely if you are, I'm just putting myself in their shoes, but I would think I would be like, why aren't they showing the audience? Like, probably there's something, I don't know. I feel like you'd be somewhat aware of those kinds of antics at this point that they use, but maybe not. And, but I think as a whole, you're right. They are starting to become aware of, at the very least, that what China is doing to them as far as lockdowns go is totally unacceptable. Especially after the fire at an apartment building over the past week that ended up with people dying because they had locked them in this apartment building with armed guards because there was COVID cases in there, and people died in this fire. People have really been rallying and fighting back. They've been taking to the streets and protesting, and they actually are winning. They're getting some significant victories, and Beijing has been backing down on some of their lockdown tactics. A few other cities have resumed public transportation to get to basic goods and services. So I hope that they do keep rising up, but man, they've got a long way to go in that country to get back to any sort of real freedom.
Yeah, and I think it's another kind of the takeaway is also about like press freedom and not just these other countries where all they have is state media and there's not a separation between the press and the government. It quickly becomes this kind of thing where they can censor reality because they control all the social media. They control all the media, so they can literally control what videos and photos get, not perfectly, sometimes things get around their control, but it's like they can censor the reality their citizens have access to. That's why, and ultimately for people to become free, the uprising has to come from within, right? It has to be the people standing up, and every government in a way exists at the consent of the governed in that if enough people truly reject the legitimacy, it can't last forever. But that's part of how they keep people content or keep them enchained to the status quo. Like in North Korea, for example, the extremely poor essential serfs that work in this kingdom in their rice farms and stuff, they think the outside world is something totally different than what it actually is because they only have access to very limited state media and information. And this is kind of a small example of that, but it shows why the free flow of information is so important, because when people have open access to information and ideas, they won't stay in chains, metaphorical chains, for very long.